Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be doing our first action webinar with you, and it's to oppose offshore drilling for the Georgia's coast. So this is a great time for you guys to pull up the PowerPoint, the Google Slide link that we sent earlier, if you haven't done that already. If you do have it pulled up, just go to View at the top left, and then you're going to hit Present, which is the first thing you'll see, and then it should go into a full screen mode. We just ask as we go through today that you flip through the slides. Our presenters are going to reference what slide number they're on as they go through. And so just keep up with wherever they're at, and they'll do their best to remember to reference the slides so that we can all move through this together. So if you go to slide 2, you'll see the agenda for this afternoon. We have myself, Alex Muir, with 100 Miles, and then I will introduce Alice Keyes, who is our VP of Coastal Conservation here at 100 Miles, and she'll give a quick introduction to the proposal of offshore drilling. And then we'll move on to Jacob Oblander, who is with the Savannah Riverkeeper, and he's going to talk a little bit about the challenges of the exploration as well as the drilling. And then we'll move on to Bill Sapp, who's joining us from the Southern Environmental Law Center from Atlanta. And he's going to talk a little bit about where we stand with the current opposition. And then from there, we'll go back to some of the tools that you guys can use that are in the presentation in order to take action opposing offshore drilling on our coast. It's going to be super simple, and you guys can take action from right from the presentation that we have today. And then we want to be very respectful of the time because we know you guys have busy schedules, and we're thankful that you were able to carve out some time for us today. So we'll have a short question and answer period afterwards just to make sure we covered everything you guys are curious about. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alice Keyes, who is our VP of Coastal Conservation, and she's going to give us all an introduction to offshore drilling.
So just so y'all know, this is our first webinar of this type of technology, and we have some amazing new tools that we're excited to roll out today. So we're going to record this presentation for anybody who missed the call and would be interested in learning more information about it. But again, if you have any trouble, contact me at 912-230-6494, and we can send you a PDF of these slides. Okay, so if you progress to slide number 4, it shows you just a quick visual of a complicated process that can be boiled down into 3 major steps. There's the process of exploration for oil and gas development, basically determining how much and where oil and gas reserves are offshore. And then the second box includes the lease sales for drilling. Since the federal government manages all activities on our ocean floor, they lease the property to private companies to actually do the drilling and the extraction. And then there's the process of extraction and production. The 2 areas that we're going to be discussing today are the first 2 boxes, exploration and lease sales for drilling. And they are all managed by the U.S. Department of Interior Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, called BOEM, and with input from other state agencies. So if you progress to slide 5, you'll see a visual of what we know as the outer continental shelf. Basically an underwater landmass that extends out from a continent and is relatively shallow compared to the other areas of the ocean that are quite deep. So there's a lot of energy exploration and economic activities that occur here, especially in the shallow parts of the outer continental shelf. State agencies have jurisdiction out from the land continent out 3 miles, and then federal jurisdiction extends from those 3 miles out to 230 miles, or about 200 nautical miles. For planning purposes, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Department of Interior, has broken the outer continental shelf into planning areas for management purposes. And you can see on slide 6 that Georgia is part of the South Atlantic planning area with all of the coast of South Carolina and part of the Atlantic coast of Florida. That area totals about 54 million acres of underwater land. So let's talk a little bit about exploration. Generally, exploration is conducted through a process of using seismic air guns or sonar technology. And in this particular situation and today, what we're going to be talking a little bit more about is seismic surveys. They're used to assess the geology and the geophysical makeup of our ocean floor. And the way they're able to do that, if you progress to slide number 8, you can see a visual of seismic air guns at work. Basically, they blast extremely loud sound waves that hit the ocean floor and bounce back to receivers that are being towed behind the ocean vessel. When that bounce back information is received by the boat's audio monitors, it helps to characterize the local geology of that area. These sound waves can penetrate the ocean substrate for more than 10 seconds at a time, up to 24 hours a day, and can be conducted for weeks at a time. And in just a moment, Jacob is going to tell us a little bit about the impact that can have on our marine life. So, I'm going to go back one more slide. Regarding the seismic testing, currently the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, along with the National Marine Fisheries Service, are in the process of issuing 5 permits to private companies to conduct seismic testing throughout the Mid- and South Atlantic planning regions, again, to look for these reserves of underwater oil and gas. So the second part of the federal process we want to talk to you about today is the development of oil and gas reserves through lease sales. As required by law, the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management every 5 years has to determine an offshore plan that will help determine the best way to meet the national energy needs of the country. And in this case, today we are looking at a draft plan that considers meeting our country's needs from 2019 to 2024. But many of us who have been working in this field for a short period of time or a long period of time know that we just went through this process about 2 years ago. In November 2016, President Obama's administration released a 5-year Outer Continental Shelf oil and gas program that was approved to cover 2017 and 2022. When the new administration came in, there was a renewed interest in expanding offshore energy and gas development. So the Trump administration issued orders in 2017 requiring federal agencies, again, to restart the 5-year planning process. So a request for information was released in July of 2017, and a draft plan an Outer Continental Shelf leasing program was released in January of 2018. And if you progress to slide 11, you'll see an image of the front cover of that proposed program. And if you click on that link, you should be able to, it'll redirect you to the actual 300-plus page document if you're interested. So what we're looking at in the plan, when you dive into the plan, you'll see that basically the federal agency has proposed to open up 90% of federal offshore lands to oil and gas development for lease sales. Again, the federal government will continue to manage offshore lands, but they're going to lease these lands to private companies for the development of oil and gas reserves. You can see on slide 12 that the South Atlantic is slated for a series of lease sales that would be initiated in 2020, 2022, and 2024. Also included in this draft proposed program, you will see that there is a chart that basically covers the estimates for how much potentially recoverable oil and gas are available in the different planning areas of offshore land in the United States. In the South Atlantic coast, they estimate that only about 410 million barrels of oil are potentially recoverable. Considering that the U.S. consumed about 6.8 billion barrels of oil in 2013, 410 million barrels is only enough to cover 1 month of our domestic demand. Proponents of this plan argue that we need additional resources for energy independence and to reduce prices of oil, but interestingly, the Department of Energy, both under Presidents Bush and Obama, concluded that oil and gas reserves off the entirety of the East Coast are not significant enough to impact either the consumer prices at the pump or to reduce dependence on overseas supplies. So if you progress to slide number 14, you'll also see a chart that comes directly from the draft proposed program looking at economic analysis. I mean, I am not an economist, but I was able to see quite clearly that when the 15 regions were assessed for net economic value, basically the social benefits minus environmental and community costs, the South Atlantic was last, basically considering at or near zero for the value to our society as a whole. So on slide 15, it only emphasizes that that our area comes in last in terms of contributing a significant amount of oil and gas reserves for the economic value of our country. So that is a quick run-through of what are some of the significant findings from the federal draft proposal as it stands now. There are many opportunities for public comment. If you proceed to slide 16, you will see a chart that shows where we are in the public comment period. Right now, we are at the tail end of a 60-day comment period responding to the draft proposed program that BOEM has released, and also responding to a request for information to be considered in a programmatic environmental impact statement. After this comment period ends tomorrow, the federal agencies will continue to process the public input, continue to process the information that they have received, and then we anticipate by the end of the year they will release a proposed program. After that proposed program is released, we, the public, will have another 90 days to comment. After that 90 days, then the proposed program will go to the President and to Congress for a record of decision to be published. So we anticipate all of that being finalized in a plan for the lease sales for the Outer Continental Shelf and an environmental impact statement by the fall of 2019. Again, it's quite a complicated process, but we really are happy that you guys are on the call and engaging with us in this opportunities for public comment, and we hope that that after this webinar that we can walk you through some steps to help you take action. So with that, I want to turn the floor over to Jacob Oblander with the Savannah Riverkeeper to just talk about the impact that these federal proposals will have on our marine life and on the state of Georgia.
All right, Jacob, you're unmuted.
Thanks, Alice. So I'm Jacob. I'm with Savannah Riverkeeper, and we've been doing a lot of work with the economic side of things, working with groups like the Business Alliance for Protection of the Atlantic Coast. There's a coalition of quite a lot of businesses and commercial fishing families. So if you want to go ahead to slide 18, talk about our fisheries. Now, while a lot of folks have focused on the dolphins and the whales that are being affected on the coast, we also need to think about our commercial fisheries. And just to give a little sort of context to seismic testing, which is one of the bigger threats as far as our sea life and marine life goes, 250 decibels is the level of sound these air guns produce. That's greater than the sound of a rocket launch. I mean, we are talking about an immense sound. There's no way it doesn't disturb our marine life. And we've seen, for example, in Norway, they lost over 50% of their catch numbers after seismic testing began. And I think it's something like 20 years later, they still haven't seen a recovery. And commercial fishing in Georgia is an $11 billion a year industry. So losing something like that on the Georgia coast is going to have a major impact. And the thing is that the seismic testing doesn't just scare away fish and marine mammals. It's scaring away plankton, which is the basis for our entire coastal ecosystem and going back into our coastal economy. If we move on to slide 19, we talk about marine mammals. Like I said, it's 250 decibels. It not only frightens animals, it actually causes injury to them. And we've seen whales beach themselves in other countries where this process is happening, where seismic testing is occurring. And that's just the exploratory part of this whole process. As Alice brought up before, we're just looking at them trying to see how much oil there is, which we've already kind of established there isn't much there. And so this has a huge impact on things like right whales and endangered species that calves off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina and Florida. And without those being able to come to these places safely and produce, that species definitely has no future. And the marine mammals are important because if you move to slide 20, it's a threat to our tourism. So the major industry along the Georgia coast is obviously tourism, ecotourism based on our wildlife as well as based on our really delicious seafood. Going back to the fishing industry not having it. Here in Georgia, tourism is the 5th largest employer in the state. It's $60.8 billion a year impact. And so, I mean, we're talking about a huge number of the jobs on our coast. I mean, just think about the people you know who live on the Georgia coast and how many people you know who don't indirectly or directly work in the tourism or service industry. It's what keeps our economy going on the coast. It's what helped us preserve so many of these places. You go back to looking at the original preservation of the Georgia coast, it's based on tourism. It's based on very wealthy people wanting to visit a beautiful place. So we start building oil derricks. We've got a problem there. The common sort of argument we hear about seismic testing and oil drilling economically is it's going to bring jobs. Well, for Georgia alone, we're talking maybe 6,500 jobs and $250 million in revenue, which is, I mean, it's nothing compared to what we're seeing from tourism right now. And the other thing about those 6,500 jobs is, as we see with most oil industry positions, including pipelines, they're bringing in their own people. They're not hiring and training locals. They'll be bringing in their own staff from places like Texas and the Gulf and Louisiana and the Northeast. I mean, we're not going to see a lot of local employment numbers going up there unless those folks move here. So that's a huge impact. The final sort of thing I want to talk about, if you go to slide 21, is our military presence. And as all of you know, here on the Georgia coast, we have a very large military presence, including a lot of naval training for military readiness off the shore, especially down near St. Mary's and Cumberland Island. And and what we're seeing is that there's a problem here. The DoD has come out and said that drilling and seismic testing is not good for military operations and readiness for the United States. And that's an important thing for us, is we need these environments to train our military personnel to make sure they're ready for future combat situations and anything that could happen here on our own coast, as well as in foreign waters. It's also a huge population group for us, and they contribute dramatically to our local and state economy. We move to slide 22. You can sort of see here what we're talking about. This graphic is a little off because it used to be a 50-mile buffer off the coast, and they now brought it even closer to a 25-mile buffer, which really puts a lot of our marine life in danger, especially our commercial fishing with whiting, shrimp, all those kind of species. The closer you get to the coast, the greater impact we're going to have. The important thing to remember with seismic testing, as you look at this map, is that as they do seismic testing, it's not one company doing it, it's multiple companies going over the same area of water repeatedly. We're not talking about one pass-through and then maybe the animals come back. We're talking about 4 to 5 pass-throughs of 250 decibel sound every 5 seconds, every 5 to 10 seconds going through. And our military leaders have come forward and said this is not a good idea. Our commercial fishing families have come forward and said this is not a good idea, as is our tourism industry. I mean, there's a lot of issues here. And if you guys have any questions, you can ask me at the end here, but I'd like to turn things over here to Bill Sapp from the Southern Environmental Law Center to talk about current opposition, what's happening locally, state level, and at the federal level. Bill?
Thank you, Jacob. Exactly. My task here is to talk about the opposition that we've been putting forth over the last few years. And when I say we, I mean folks and groups all the way up to Maine, but mostly up to Virginia. You know, those are the core groups that we've been working with. And this has really been a collective effort. I've been practicing law for about 25 years, and this has been the most organized and large effort I've seen. So let me start with federal activities. And these, these are all important. I mean, both federal, state, and local. But let me start, and this is going to be on slide 25. This lists some of the things we've been doing up in D.C. And SELC has 3 people in an office up in D.C., and they do all this stuff every day, working with congressional staff and going to meetings in places like OMB and CEQ. So they're moving all the time. And then we also have folks like Alice, who goes up to D.C. on a regular basis and helps with that effort of trying to persuade these agencies to do the right thing. Now, when that fails, and in this case it may well fail, we have to go on to taking legal measures, and that includes filing comments, just like I hope all of you will do, and building a record that we will rely on during the litigation we bring. And that record is just critical. And it represents everything that the agency looked at before making the decision. And that's what any lawsuit that we move forward is based on. As far as lawsuits already in the making, as Alice said, there's 5 permits for seismic testing moving forward. They'll probably be issued any day. And we're already ready with motions to file in those cases the day they come out. And then going down to leasing, as Alice explained, it's a very long process. But when it's finalized, we'll be filing litigation at that point as well. If you go on to slide 26, this slide shows that we've been having an impact. Any area that is not dark gray has a politician that is opposed to offshore drilling. And we want to make this map more and more red as we go along. On 27, you'll see some pictures of folks from the coast going up to D.C. and meeting with, agencies or congressional staff and pushing forward the idea that offshore drilling is not the way to go. Moving on to 28, we talked about federal opposition, and now we're talking about state opposition. The biggest thing that we have done is file a resolution in the state assembly to oppose offshore drilling. And it ended up that the resolutions that we all submitted ended up both in the Senate and in the House. And you can see on this slide the folks that were the sponsors of these bills, and you can also see that these bills are stuck in committee right now. Despite having some strong sponsors behind these bills, both of them are stuck in committees. And we also list there the chairs of those committees. And Alex is going to tell you how you can help break these bills out of those committees and get them on track again. Then on 29, you see the different folks from the General Assembly that are supporting the bills that I just talked about. They actually get it, that we cannot have offshore oil drilling. And we are very grateful that they were willing to step forward and support these bills. Then if you go to 30, this one talks about what our governor is doing. And if you look at the eastern seaboard, you'll see that Maine is colored purple. Well, that means they're actually in favor of offshore drilling. All the red states are opposed. And when I say opposed, that means the governor of those states is opposed. That leaves Georgia with this sort of tan color, and that means our governor, Governor Deal, can't make up his mind whether he should support offshore drilling or not. And right now his position is, I want to know how much oil is out there before I make a decision. Well, the problem is there's not much oil out there. So he seems to be willing to let seismic testing go forward to find out that same answer. There were 8 oil exploratory oil rigs built off the coast in Georgia waters back in the 80s. All of them came up dry. The seismic testing that's already been done back previously indicates the same is true, that there's not oil out there. You go on to 31, you can see what has happened and what we've all done on the local level. And it's been a lot. This started during the Obama administration in our attempts to get him to withdraw the lands in front of the East Coast from leasing. And we continue to build on that foundation. As far as resolutions, these are resolutions opposing offshore oil drilling. And they and these resolutions, more than 140 of cities and counties on the East Coast have signed these resolutions. 8 of those have come from Georgia. A lot of communities from Savannah to St. Mary's, from Brunswick to Atlanta, have signed these resolutions and have contributed to the overall push to get this plan of offshore leasing to end. You also can see, and Jacob mentioned a lot of this, how the seafood industry would be adversely affected by oil exploration. And as a result, you have all these different associations and councils of commercial seafood harvesters that are against offshore oil. Another statistic that is very impressive is that up and down the East Coast, 41,000 businesses and 500,000 fishing families are opposed to offshore oil. So that's occurred on a local level, and this map really reveals what those resolutions are like. I mean, all the way from the tip of Florida, all the way up to Massachusetts, there have been tons of communities that have signed these resolutions. And certainly with the Obama administration, that resonated and helped make Obama make the decision he did. You also can see that Atlanta, even though we're far from the coast, Atlanta signed a resolution and it was unanimous. Now I'm going to introduce Alex. She starts with slide 33, and now that you're fired up to do something about offshore oil, she's going to tell you what actions you can take.
Thanks so much, Bill. So this is Alex Muir with 100 Miles. Hopefully you guys are all well-versed now in some of the troubles that we're facing with offshore drilling and feel prepared to take action and speak to some of our decision makers. You can join the 700,000 citizens that are represented by the local resolutions that have already occurred in order to encourage our governor to speak out against offshore drilling, and also say thank you to our representatives and senators who already have, and encourage the representatives and senators that have not to do so. So I'm going to start on slide 33. You'll see the steps we're going to walk through. So the first one I'll cover is the petition that you can sign very easily from online, and then we'll go through how to comment on BOEM's plan, and then how to use a new tool that we have called Call Out. And then Bill will then talk a little bit about the social media tools that you could also use. So if you move on to slide 34, you will see that at the top, I don't recommend clicking this right now, but it says click here to sign the petition. If you do click it now, it will redirect you to change.org. And you can see in the screenshot we have there that it's very simple. All you need to do is add your name, first and last, and a good email address for yourself and your address so that they know that you're a Georgia resident. And then you can choose to leave the share with Facebook friends selected so that it does share directly to your Facebook page. And what you'll do next is hit Sign Petition, which is the red button at the bottom of the screenshot. And then it'll move you through a couple steps just to try and encourage you to sign other petitions, but feel free to skip those or not. But we really want you to sign this particular petition. And this petition, along with the paper copies we've had, there's over 2,000 signatures on that petition from Georgia residents. So we've made a really big impact, but we're still looking to have an even bigger impact with this petition. And this has gotten directly into the hands of our decision makers, and so we'd really like to continue growing this opposition through the petition. It's very simple. Once we're done with this presentation, I recommend that you close out presentation mode, pull it up just in a web browser, and then find the click here to sign petition, and it will redirect you to change.org. And once you've signed the petition, it'll give you a chance to add some comments there, but really all we need is your signature on that one. If you do want to comment, I'll direct you to slide 35. This is a great place to kind of elaborate on how you're feeling. So we really need to have some comments made, even more than the nearly, I think, over 500,000 comments we already have now on the notice that BOEM presented for the leasing of the offshore drilling sites. So to make that comment, that formal comment on the notice, what you're going to want to do is go to regulations.gov, and it's very simple. If you put in the search bar, like you see on slide 35, oil and gas leasing, and then you just hit search. And again, I recommend afterwards, if you want a simple way to get to regulations.gov, just hit that click here to leave a comment link at the top of this slide. So once you've typed in oil and gas leasing and you've hit search, your screen will pop up like you see on slide 36 on the screenshot there. And it should be the first notice that pops up, but I've included the ID on the side of our slides. So it's the BOEM 2017-0074-0001. And you'll hit comment now, which you see the red arrow pointing to. And that's going to redirect you precisely to where we need you to enter your comments of opposition for offshore drilling. And so you can include whatever you deem necessary in the comment box. You can also choose to upload files like you see on slide 37 here. So this is step number 5 along the side on the left side of these on the presentation. So you can enter your information, enter what you want to be formally recognized with the BOEM comments. And if you would like to get some samples, 100 Miles would be happy to provide that if you're not quite sure how to phrase what you'd like to put in that text box there. So after you've entered that and attached any files you see necessary, you'll scroll down the page and it'll look like slide 38, where you'll just enter your contact information, your mailing address, but you want to be sure that you uncheck the I am submitting on behalf of a third party box, which you'll see a red arrow pointing to, unless you are truly submitting on behalf of a third party. But I think most of the people listening today are residents looking to take their own personal action. So just make sure you uncheck that box, and then you will hit continue. and then it will take you to what you see in slide 39, where it will give you the opportunity to just review what comments you've put, review your address, make sure your information is correct, and you have to verify that you've read and understand the statement above, which you see a red arrow pointing to. You just check that box and hit submit comment. And then I didn't include a screenshot of this, but it will allow you to send a receipt of this comment to yourself via email. So the next thing after you hit submit comment would just be an opportunity to enter your email address and have a receipt sent to you. But once you've hit submit comment, you've done your job, and we so appreciate it. So hopefully you guys can take an opportunity to do that. And like I mentioned back on, it was slide 35, that's where you can click the link to be redirected to regulations.gov. The next thing I'm going to share with you guys is extremely exciting for us because it makes it easy as can be to contact our decision makers. And this is called Call Out. It's a new tool, and we're going to use it in several different ways. So the first way I'm going to show you that we're using it is to take action in order to contact our governor, which, as Bill explained, we really need that to happen so that we can help make up his mind for him. So the first thing you're going to do is, once we've closed out the presentation and we're done, please click here to the Call Out for your governor, and it's going to pull up what you see on this screenshot in the slide. And you'll enter your personal information, just your name and contact information, but it doesn't store this. It just uses this to populate fields as you go through the actions of contacting your legislators. Once you've filled it out, it will be retained in your computer, so you won't have to populate these fields every time. So that's super simple, and you hit submit, and that's that's slide 40. We'll move on to slide 41 now, and this is what will happen after you've hit submit. It knows based on your address who your legislators are. So of course, we're all in Georgia listening to this. So for the governor, it's going to pull up Governor Deal. And we have two ways that we would like you to take action with Governor Deal's office. The priority is to call him and let him know how you feel about offshore drilling, and it could not be simpler than using this tool. All you need to do is enter your phone number where you see that red arrow pointing to the box and on the top box. And before you call, if you want to get your bearings and kind of figure out some talking points, you'll see that it says that you can read the script under number 2, and you can click here to view the script. You can preview that script. You can personalize it, add in your own stories. Please let them know why you care about the coast, but it's just a great opportunity to get some talking points by viewing that ahead of time. But it will also pop up immediately when you make the call. So to make the call, again, all you do is enter your personal phone number in that where you see that red arrow pointing to, and then you hit call, the blue button underneath. And what will happen is when you hit call, it will immediately pop up with what you see on the next slide, which is our script. So if you go to slide 42, the script would come up, and then you will get a phone call from Pooler, Georgia on whatever phone number you entered, and that will redirect you. It takes about 3 seconds or so to redirect you to the governor's office, but that gives you a minute to get your bearings straight and kind of review the script one more time before they pick up. And then from there, all we need you to do is share your stories and share why you oppose offshore drilling on the coast. So that's the first action and the priority action for the governor. If you move on to slide 43, you'll also see that we are asking people to tweet the governor, and that is the second action that popped up, so the second white box you see in the background from the screenshot. So when you hit tweet on there, it will bring up this pop-up that allows you to either sign into Twitter, or if you're already signed in, you'll be signed in automatically, or create a Twitter account. And there's a pre-populated tweet, and you're welcome to customize it as well. But this allows us to have a collective front, both in our social media presence and by our phone calls. And once you've sent this tweet, you can choose, you'll see on the bottom white square, to keep tweeting, and it has up to 5 tweets. So you can continue to send these tweets and share how you feel and customize them as you wish. So that is how we are hoping to take action, and we're hoping you will take action with the governor's office. And now I'm going to move on to slide 44. And this is how we are working with our state legislators. So it's a very similar process. when you click this link at the top, the click here to call out your legislators, you would be redirected to the advocacy page that had the initial form for you to fill out with your name and your address in order to find who your state legislators are. So you would fill that out, and it would possibly already be populated by what you put in before, but you can always change that if you think that's necessary or if someone else is using your computer. And then you hit submit, and it will show you your senators, and will also bring up your representatives, but it will start with your senator. So the screen will look like what you see here on slide 44. And so when I was doing it, I had Senator Ligon pop up, of course. I'm here in Brunswick, and it brought up an email for me. Now, sometimes the emails will not be able to be edited depending on the messages that we have for that specific senator. So sometimes we have a thank you letter for your support, but senators who have not stood with the resolution yet, we have a more convincing email that we would like to send to them. So there are portions of it that you will not be able to edit, but in the text box you'll see portions that you can edit and make your own to say thank you or to convince your legislators to take action. So once you've determined what you want to put in your email, you will hit send email. And I just want to note that you don't need to include dear Senator, whoever you're writing to, or sign your name at the end, because that's already pre-populated. But you do want to make sure that however your name appears on the left-hand side where it says first and last name is how you would want it to appear in the email, because that is how it will be signed. So if you were to hit skip, or if you were to hit send email, it would go on to the representative that is from your area, and it may have a similar message or it may have something different, but it is so simple. I can't express enough how simple this is, that the message has already been typed by people who are well informed, and the message is ready to go out to your representative. So truly it is just a click of a button. So once we close out this presentation, we would be thrilled if you guys would take action by going back and clicking on those links wherever you see the red writing at the top where it says click here. I'm going to turn it over to Bill, who is going to just refresh us on how we can use some social media hashtags and social media tools to reach out to our legislators.
Thanks, Alex. There's only 4 slides to go, and I'll get to the first one, which is 45. It includes some pictures of stickers that we've put together and gotten out in the hundreds, and the idea here is to put those stickers somewhere, take a picture of it, get it on Facebook, and it's the same is true here. We put together these don't spill yard signs, and again, we want as many people as possible to get those out on Facebook and spread them around. The next slide is this is very new. This is an animation, and I encourage all of you to look at it after this session, because it really is scary. If infrastructure came to our shores, it would not be pretty. Going on to 47, this is also something that's brand new. Our folks up in Virginia put it together, and it's an interactive map and has a lot of information. You can drill down pretty far, and it reviews much of what we were talking about today. And finally, this is number 48. This just gives you access to these different tools, and I encourage you to take a look at them. And then on to 49 is a slide for questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to unmute everybody in just a minute here, and then we'll be open to questions. So let me give this a try. All right. My switchboard just lit up, so it looks like everybody is unmuted.
So we do want to open the floor to questions from those of you who are participating. And again, we have run through a lot of information today. We've covered a very complicated process, and so if it's overwhelming, understandable. We are overwhelmed every day. So, but we want to open the floor for questions. We've gotten a couple of questions through email, but does anybody on the phone have any questions that they'd like to ask the presenters or about the material that was covered or material that wasn't covered?
Yes, this is Robin Gunn from Ossabaw Island Foundation in Savannah.
Hi, Robin.
Thanks for doing this. I have a question about slide number 14, the net economic value ranges by planning area. Can you indicate what the source of this graph is?
Yes, I can. That came directly from the draft proposal that was released by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. It is actually figure 5-13.
Okay.
I don't know exactly the page number, but this came from the federal government themselves, from the economists who participated in the creation of this program.
Okay, so it's figure 5-13 in the current draft that just got released in January?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, I'll ask one of these questions from email. The question I'll direct this to Alex. It's basically, if we can only do one or two things, what should we do?
Okay. Well, I think that the first step that we want to take is to call the governor. And like I showed you in those slides toward the end, it is extremely simple to just enter your phone number and hit call. We have the script pre-written, ready to go if you need some prompts. But it's very simple to just be redirected from that link we have in the slide at the end where it says, click to call out your governor. So that's definitely the priority at this point. Also, the period for comment does end tomorrow. And then similarly, we would like people to utilize the call-out tool to contact their legislators, of course. Those are both really simple ways to make a change.
Yeah. And something to add to that is the calls to the governor and the legislators can occur. Ideally they can happen today, but they can also happen next week. The comment period for the federal plan closes tomorrow, but the calls can continue and the emails can continue through the General Assembly or until we get the Senate Resolution 706 and House Resolution 1041 passed. Good question. Any other questions from the folks on the phone? All right, well, we've got one more question through email. And the question is, what impact can opposition at the local and state level have on the federal government's decision? That is a very, very good question. When Bill was discussing the opposition to the federal agency's previous plans to open up the South Atlantic and the Atlantic coast to oil and gas exploration and development, he talked that the Obama administration heavily considered the local opposition and the state opposition in their decision. While legally the federal agencies are not required to consider local and state positions, apart from the governor, it weighs very heavily on the analysis that's conducted at the federal level. Alex mentioned that almost 500,000 or just over 500,000 comments have been submitted already on this federal proposal. And in my review of some of those, the majority of those 500,000 comments are in opposition to opening up our oceans to even more sound, opening up our oceans to this type of activity that is really detrimental to the tourism and the fisheries economies that the majority of our coasts depend on. And so I think continuing to voice local opposition is extremely important. And especially important is the state opposition that right now in Georgia is really coming from the leadership of our state legislators. We have almost full support from our coastal legislators, our senators, and our House of Representatives members. And so now we just really need to work on the governor as well. So I think that the local and state opposition can have an influence on the federal government's decisions, without doubt.
Yeah, Alice, if I could add to that, those statistics, I mean, over 140 communities signing resolutions, ended up appearing in the New York Times several times, the Washington Post, and it basically gave the reporters something concrete to grab onto and really demonstrate that there was opposition to drilling offshore. The other thing it does is informs the senators and representatives in Congress on a federal level. And even though you may not have or convince one of those politicians to come out and openly oppose the drilling, one thing that may come out of it is the fact that there are a number of riders that have been introduced to appropriation bills that were adverse to what we want. And if a congressman is sort of on the fence about whether he or she should vote for that, hearing about all this opposition may well encourage them to make the right choice.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, so we've gotten another question by email, and this question is related specifically to slide 20. And slide 20 is threats to tourism, and the question is related to the source of the tourism statistics. So I'm going to direct that question.
So that data is coming straight from Georgia, from the Bureau, from their Bureau of Revenue. That's where that data is coming from. It's from Atlanta, from our state office of revenue.
Right.
We use all of our data, all the data that I use for tourism stuff is coming straight out of the state capitals. It's their numbers that they've got. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah. And I think a lot of the statistics and the information and the charts that we have used in this presentation come from sources, basically that credible sources, and majority of them come from our federal and state agencies. So if there are any questions related to these, please feel free to direct those to any of the presenters, and we'll share with you those sources of information and links to the full documents themselves. Okay. Any more questions from the participants? Anything to add from the presenters?
This is a wonderful presentation. The technology's been amazing. Y'all go. This is just fantastic. This is Charles McMillan. Y'all are doing a great job.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles. That's awesome to hear. All right, guys. Well, thanks for giving us your time today. This is Alex speaking. So now, hopefully, you will exit out of the presentation or minimize the presentation. It's not in full screen anymore, but go ahead and click those links and take some action. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. You can find our emails on the websites. We're all available to talk more about this if you have questions.
We are, and thank you so much to everybody for participating. We will follow up with you with a survey to ask you some questions about how you think it went or ways that we can improve this technology. As Alex mentioned, this is brand new, and we are very excited to be launching it with you, and we really appreciate everything that y'all do to keep Georgia's coast pristine for ourselves and for future generations. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.